Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
I've just unmuted myself.
Fantastic. You're learning the controls.
What do I do to...
No, we just like to see you eating popcorn, Hannah, and you don't know.
I didn't realise, yeah. Where's the camera option?
I've never heard it.
How do I watch everybody else?
I think it's on the bottom screen.
Yeah, I can't see anything.
And it should have your microphone and then a picture of a
whole of the ship.
In the top right corner, it should be able to change the view from speaker view to gallery view.
No, I haven't got anything. I've just got top right. I've got view.
Click on the view, and if you click on view, it should give you an option to change from speaker view.
Well, I've got standard side-by-side speaker or side-by-side gallery.
Side-by-side gallery sounds about right.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Sylvia. Are we the only ones here?
No.
Oh, the others. I can't see the others. Can you?
We've got Mrs. Abrahams.
Good evening, Rabbi Cohen and everybody.
Good evening.
Because we're hiding.
Baruch Hashem. We're going on a tour through Zoom. That's a whole new level. Forget Parshah for a minute. Let's talk Zoom.
Why? Why are we talking? It's a bit modern. Why are we talking Zoom? I'm ready. I'm ready with the notes for the Parshah.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to do a little bit about Zoom just for a moment.
Oh.
My Zaidi Oltain, my mother's father, his yard site was just last week. He lived to 100 years old, Liain Hara. And at the yard site Zoom meeting, so his son-in-law, my uncle, Fetet Shemei Garari from Montreal, was saying how, on the one hand, we're so far apart. I don't think any of our children live in the same country, let alone in the same city. So they're all spread out. And had they tried to make a yard site gathering in a normal time, or in a couple of years ago, there's no way everyone would be able to make it. And he was saying how beautiful it is to be able to see everybody at least over Zoom.
Oh.
But then he said a very interesting idea, which I found it resonated a lot. And that is, there are times where people feel very, very far apart from each other ideologically, where people have one opinion and other people have a different opinion, and we don't feel like we can get together. And throughout our history, it has caused tremendous discord and separation when different people don't agree. And yet we are told that at the end of time, in the times of redemption, we'll be closer to each other and we'll work in peace with each other. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to think the same, because that would be redundancy. But everybody will still manage to figure out how to make it work together. So what he was saying was that sometimes when you meet someone in the same room and you sat there for an hour, things happen and people get upset and people say things. But when you're on Zoom, it's safe. You're far enough away that if you don't want to hear, you can just put off the sound. You don't want to be heard, you put yourself on mute. You don't want to see, you don't have to look. You don't want to be seen, you switch off your video, but you're close enough that you can make things work. And you could switch on your camera when you're ready, and you could switch on your microphone, which is a very, it's a healthy way for people to be able to interact without it getting too heavy, or at least it could be. So you were saying, in a sense, the amount of gathering together of harmony that could be created via Zoom or in the style of Zoom should be a message. It's not saying that's what it should be in life, but at least it should be a wake-up call that if we don't have agreements or we have disagreements, we should learn from Zoom. It's okay to be there and not have your camera on. It's okay to be there on mute. It's okay there to be on Zoom and have your camera on if you can handle it, or have yourself unmuted if you can handle it. So that was his interesting angle. And it was beautiful to be able to hear such a thing from a rabbi who barely knows how to switch on a computer. And yet he'd been exposed to Zoom by his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, Kanaan Hara. And he saw it as a beautiful lesson in life. So we spoke Zoom. We learned a little bit about Zoom, at least a good lesson from Zoom. We're now going to go to Parshah. I'm going to ask you to join along on the journey. It's a three-step journey, starting off with what's going on the Jewish calendar, followed by what's going on in the Parshah, And then, of course, one area of the Parshah that we can use as one of the practical, relevant life lessons, life messages for today, 21st century. So we have what's going on in the Jewish calendar first. It happens to be that we are now 2.5 weeks till Hanukkah. So 2 weeks from Thursday night is already the first light. It's coming quickly. And a lot of people think, yeah, there's loads of time. We're still in November. We're still in November. We're 2 weeks away from Hanukkah. If you wait till the 25th of December, you'll have missed the entire Hanukkah, which will be finished on the 17th, 18th. So we've got to wake up and smell the coffee and share the light. We've got to let people know that Hanukkah is coming very quickly. Don't miss it. That's number one. Number two, it happens to be that on the Hasidic calendar, the month of Kislev is very, very lively. It's very lively. Let me just make sure I'm not missing things out here. Okay. On the Hasidic calendar, the month of Kislev has lots of Yomim Tovim of celebrations, starting off with the very first day of Kislev that we spoke about last week, the celebration of when the Rebbe, our Rebbe, had suffered a heart attack and became better. And we spoke a little bit, about the messages that teaches us. This week, on Thursday, it will be the 9th of Kislev, 10th of Kislev, which makes it a Hasidic Yom Tov. In the Hasidic circles, we wear Shabbos clothing, as if it's one of the holidays. There's no tachman to be said, not on the day and not the day before, and mincha. What's the big excitement? What's so celebratory? And the answer is, it's the day, the anniversary of one of the original Hasidic masters, one of the earliest ones, Reb Dov Ber Lubavitch, who towards the end of his life, it was actually 1.5 years, 2 years before he passed away, family members who were Hasidically challenged, who actually very hard time with Judaism in general, decided to create a libel, and they were trying to force him to give up money. And to the extent they're willing to try and have him framed by the local government, by the state government. And it ended up becoming an interrogation process during which Reb Dov Ber, the Mittler Rebbe, had to travel. He wasn't a very healthy man. He had to travel all the way to the capital of the state where he was in Vitebsk, and there he had to explain his position, answer a lot of questions about what Hasidic teachings are to people who had never studied anything to do with Hasidism or Judaism. And he had to make it in a way understandable that they could understand and appreciate. It was a very long journey. But when it cleared, when the anniversary of when he was sent free to go home, this excitement was so great, was so enormous, they established it was going to be a day of celebration. But more importantly, Reb Dov Ber himself explained that the entire framing, the challenge, the journey wasn't just that Hashem had let the bad guys try and get the upper hand. Not at all. It was all part of the master plan. And therefore, he explained it to mean that the Eibishter Rebbeinu Shalom was testing whether or not he would allow the teachings of Reb Dov Ber to continue to thrive. And by getting clearance, he said, just like his father celebrated his release, which is going to be celebrated next week, or just after next week, which was the 19th day of Kislev, one generation later, he said, this is a similar type of celebration. Now, the minute you equate the two, you already have, oh boy, do you have a party. You have an exciting time. It's energy to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. More importantly, even when it's fellow people from the same team, so to speak. They were family members. They were not only family members, they were Jewish people who were supposedly should have been supporters. And yet they turned around and made this terrible challenge. In the Hasidic circles, this is a day of where even when things come challenges from within, it's a day that we can continue with absolute confidence, knowing that Hashem will be with us. And that's a code word. When we say challenges from within, it's a code word for not only other people who are supposed to be our supporters, when I become my own biggest challenge. When I become my own biggest challenge is very, very real. How many times have we promised ourselves never to make a particular mistake again? And yet we find ourselves doing exactly that. And we think, oh, Maya, are we ever going to break out of this vicious cycle? And it's on days like Tess and Yud Kislev that we encourage ourselves and we stand up with confidence, knowing that however challenging our own personal challenges may be, Hashem is on our side. Hashem hasn't dropped us into the deep end and said, hey, swim it out on your own. No, chas v'shalom. Hashem has told us to swim it out. It's not on our own. Hashem is here with us at every step of the way, including every bit of circumstance that adds towards the challenge that we have. And it's all part of Hashem's master plan. So the celebration is enormous. It really is. And in the Mittler Rebbe's times, the average of his followers was capable of concentrating on meditation for 5 or 6 hours straight. And that wasn't the big guys. That was the regular guys. Can you imagine for 6 hours concentrating without stopping, being unaware of what's going on around you because you're lost in thought? We're not talking about lost on the TV or lost on a computer game. We're talking about lost in meditation for 6 hours. And that was the regular average. And the Mittler Rebbe of Doiber was known a bit like the comparison was made between his father and himself. His father was like the spring of fresh water. And his son, Reb Doiber, was like a flowing river that's broad and continues non-stop to sweep down with unlimited amount of information. And that was Reb Doiber. He poured so much depth at his students, at his followers, and they took it up. It was unbelievable. If you read the text of the Mittler Rebbe's Memorim, it's just uplifting to imagine being stood there when you have 20 pages of one chapter of a discourse. Could you imagine standing and listening to 20 pages being said, and the Mittler Rebbe, the Rebbe, is going on. He's not short of words to say. And it's just amazing to just continue exploring it. It's not simple stuff. It's deep. And until today, the followers, those who studied the teachings of the Mittler Rebbe, those who follow those Memorim, are learned people. And they love it. Because that's exactly what it is. Unlimited amounts of sharing of wealth of information. And it's information about Hashem. Pages and pages and pages of where a person can get lost in the comparisons, in the connection between creator and creation, and how we relate to Hashem, the questions of all sorts of philosophical questions that might come up, Hasidic questions that come up, and exploring them in a way that's readily understood to those who can hold on for that long. That was the Mittler Rebbe on an entirely different level. The relationship was very strong, and therefore the celebration was enormously strong. It happens to be that the 2 years after he was released, that just 2 years later, the Mittler Rebbe was so frail from the entire ordeal, he passed away the day before the anniversary. So instead of it being a tremendous celebration, it was a bittersweet celebration. Why was it bittersweet? On the one hand, it was very bitter. They just lost their Rebbe. But at the same time, there was clear instructions to celebrate and be grateful to Hashem. So they invented a song. It's a song that's still sung today. Avram Fried, one of the famous Hasidic singers, sings this song. The Rebbe hat geheißen freilich sein. Those are the words of the song. The Rebbe instructed that we should rejoice. The Rebbe instructed we should rejoice was the Hasidim trying to encourage themselves at a time of mourning to at the same time also hold on to joy. And in a sense, that's exactly the message of the entire celebration. It's difficult times. And we don't laugh. We don't ignore reality when someone has a hard time. And unfortunately, there are many, many people who have very difficult challenges. But that doesn't stop us from celebrating the opportunity that those very challenges are presenting. So on the one hand, it's a challenge, and at the same time, this is the journey of Yud Kislev, to find somewhere deep inside of us the koyach, the ability to be able to celebrate as well. Wow. This is this week. This is what we're celebrating. This is the Jewish calendar of this week. So that's one step of today's class. Let's try and make it happen, not because we're looking for challenges. Enough tzaras. Now we need to try and make it into opportunity. Hashem should give us the koyach to be able to transform everything we have and know in the goodness going forward. Let's go now on to the second step. What's going on in the Parshah? I'm going to preface this by saying school teachers, movie writers, love these parashas, these sections of the Torah. The whole book of Parashas, every parasha is another beautiful story, but with so much drama. There's so many, it makes such a great story. And that's exactly what we're doing. This week's parasha opens up after last week. We have the brothers, the twins, Yaakov and Esav, the struggle from day one, and how Yaakov deceives his father and outwits his brother and manages to get the brachas, the blessings. And then when his brother finds out Esav is going to kill Yaakov in revenge, and mother Rivka prophetically realizes this and tells her youngest son Yaakov, who she was the one who instigated that he'd go in and get the brachas, she says to him, son, it's way too dangerous for you to hang around here. Do yourself a favor, go and find yourself a wife by Uncle Lavan's house. My Uncle Lavan, my brother Lavan, your Uncle Lavan, lives miles away. Head out there, and then you'll be out of harm's way. Stick it out there until things calm down, and I'll call you back when things are better. But in the meantime, don't hang around there. It's way too dangerous. So this week's parasha opens up where Yaakov is on the run. He's not running, but he's leaving town. He leaves town, and the famous story where Yaakov lays down on the journey, doesn't realize, but he's on the Temple Mount, Har Moriah, and there he has a dream, and he sees a ladder going from earth all the way up to heaven, and the angels of Hashem are climbing up the ladder. And the top of the ladder is Hashem, and then angels are coming back down the ladder. And of course, Rashi asks, don't angels exist in heaven? So why are they climbing up the ladder before they go down the ladder? Shouldn't it be coming down the ladder from heaven down to earth, and then back up the ladder from earth back to heaven? Says Rashi, no. The angels that he saw were his guardian angels. And whilst he was in Israel, in the Holy Land, he had holier angels that went with him wherever he would be. But now that he was leaving Israel, those angels went up the ladder. And different angels came back down the ladder to be with him as he traveled in Chol, in the diaspora, outside Israel. And that's where he's headed now. He's going out of Israel with a new set of angels. But in that dream, Hashem promises him, don't worry, Yaakov, you're leaving Israel. You'll be back, and I'll guard you. And the whole way along, you'll be okay, and you'll become a mighty nation. Yaakov wakes up, and of course, the first thing he does is expresses his gratitude. He says thanks to Hashem. And he creates an altar, and he pours oil, whatever he had, and he thanks Hashem for the good news. And then he goes along. By the way, the archaeologists who were searching for the ladder, Jacob's ladder, for years and years and years, they've actually never found it. Any idea why? Because it was a dream and it didn't really exist. Jacob's ladder was a dream. I was just having a laugh. Sorry, it was a joke. They never found Jacob's ladder because it was a dream, just like they didn't find the 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows of Pharaoh, because there was also a dream, right? Okay, back to what we're talking about here. Jacob leaves home. After he leaves the Mount Moriah, he goes off to Uncle Lavan's territory. It's in Turkey area now, Western Turkey. And that's where, as he comes into town, he meets his cousin, Rachel. And Rachel's coming tending to the flock because her father has no sons. And she is the only one who could tend to the sheep of his father. And of course, the story goes, Yaakov sees her coming, and he single-handedly unblocks the massive rock that was blocking the well and waters the sheep. And then he gets talking to his cousin, And basically he says to her, I want to marry you. Let me go home with you. And she brings him home. She runs home before him. And Uncle Lavan comes running out. Oh, they've come from the faraway land. We all know Avram and his descendants are mighty wealthy. He must be loaded with cash, just like when his mother got married, my sister. Then Lavan's thinking, oh boy, did we get gifts and money. Of course it's coming again, let's go. But of course Yaakov didn't have any of that because Yaakov came empty-handed. And the story goes, he ends up working for Uncle Lavan first for a month, just to stay. And then he does a deal. And the deal is he's going to work in exchange for the rights to marry his cousin. And Uncle Lavan does the deal 7 years of work in exchange for marriage of his daughter. And of course, the pasuk tells us that Yaakov worked 7 years, and the time flew by because he was so excited. He was so passionate about getting married to Rachel. And on the night of the wedding, little did he know, or he suspected, but it was nothing he could do to help. Lavan does the dirty trick and changes the deal. He switches Rachel for Leah, and Yaakov marries Leah. And only the next morning does he realize, Lavan says, oh, what's the big deal? Let's do another 7 years and you'll have Rachel as well. I'm not going to let you wait 7 years. You can marry her now and you'll work 7 years in credit. I trust you. And that's exactly what Yaakov does. He works for another 7 years. During those 7 years, he loves Rachel first. And she becomes, in his mind, the main wife. And as the story goes, Leah actually has children whilst Rachel doesn't. She actually has 4 children first. And Yehuda, correct. And at that point, Rachel realizes that she's not having children. So she says to Yaakov, let's do what your grandmother did. Sarah brought her maidservant to her husband Avraham as a competition wife. And in that merit, she merited to have children. Perhaps I will do the same. You take my maidservant, you take Bilhah as a wife, and perhaps in that merit, she'll also have children. And so Yaakov marries Bilhah and has 2 more children. And Leah, not to be outsmarted, does the same. She brings Zilpah, her maidservant, to Yaakov. And as she has 2 children, so now Yaakov has 4 and 2 is 8 children. And then Leah has 2 more children. He now has 10 children. And Leah prophetically sees that there are going to be only 12 tribes. And if Yaakov were now to have another child with any of the other 3 wives, not with Rachel, Rachel won't have more than 1 or will have less children than even the maidservants. So when she gets pregnant again, she makes a judgment herself. She davens to Hashem, please don't let me have another boy, so that my sister Rachel shouldn't be less than at least the maidservants. And that's why she called her daughter who was born Dinah. Like the Beis Din, the house of judgment, Leah made judgment. She made Dinah. She judged herself, and she said that I don't want to have another son, so that my sister Rachel, my competitive wife, who my husband loves more than me, shouldn't fall out, shouldn't lose out. And amazingly, Hashem listened to her davening, and she has a daughter, not a son, and that way Rachel could still have the availability of 2 sons. And Baruch Hashem, for Rachel's prayers are answered in this week's Parshah, that she has her first son. Calls her son Yosef. Why did she call her son Yosef? Yosef Hashem li beinacher. May Hashem grant me another son. What a wonderful way. Thank you, Hashem. But that doesn't mean I don't pray for more. It's a beautiful lesson in life already. Rachel teaches us that when Hashem gives us good things, we don't not say thank you. Of course we say thank you. But that doesn't mean we can't pray for more. And we should. We should always pray for more. Hashem has a Yadim Leah Psucha Gdosha Barachava. Hashem can afford. It's got all it takes. And that's what she does. She prays and she asks Hashem, Yosef, may Hashem add that she should have another son. That son wasn't born in this week's Parshah. Sorry, it was. It wasn't. Sorry, apologies.
No, it takes a teraphim.
Can't remember. Right. When Yosef is born, Hashem appears to Yaakov. He's already worked for 7 years. He's worked for another 7 years. And then after the 14 years are up, there's been another 6 years where he's not working for marriage, because he's already worked 14 years for marriage, but he's worked another 6 years for pay. And during these 6 years, Lavan the swindler, his uncle,
Hello?
we're back for more.
Oh, thank you.
We were just having fun. Oh, Hashem was having fun. Okay, we're going to put this back on. We're almost finished the Parsha. The end of the Parsha we have where Yaakov Avinu leaves Uncle Lavan's house. And why does he leave Uncle Lavan's house? He's going back to Israel. Hashem tells him the time is now. Yep. I'm going to just do this. Am I here? I'm not here. Maybe I'm here. Here we go. Yeah. And Hashem tells Uncle Lavan, sorry, tells Yaakov, leave, go back to Eretz Yisrael. And on the way, Uncle Lavan says, hold on 1 second. Where's Yaakov gone? I wanted to stay here. He chases Yaakov. And whilst he's chasing, Hashem appears to Uncle Lavan in a dream and tells him, be careful. Do not touch Yaakov or his family. And as the parasha closes, is where Yaakov and Lavan make an agreement during which Yaakov tells Lavan, we'll still meet, but we'll never hurt each other. You don't hurt me, I don't hurt you. We'll come together, but we're never going to hurt each other. And the end of the parasha is the very last pasuk. Yaakov once again sees angels. Which angels does he see? He sees the same angels that left him when he left Israel. He now sees them come back, and the changing of the guards as he comes back to Eretz Yisrael. That's Parshas Vayeitzei in a nutshell. So as we said, yes, it's a very dramatic parsha. There's loads going on in this week's parsha, but we're going to look for one particular area that's going to give us tools, life messages for this week. Okay, the topic of this week's class is rooting out recidivism and the quest to cure the problem, not the symptom. I'm going to ask you the following. If I was to give you £1 million to make Manchester city centre, town, a safer place, how would you spend £1 million to make town a safer place? What would you do with £1 million? Anybody?
More police.
More police? That's going to cost quite a fortune, but yeah, it's a great start. Help me out. Give me some more ideas.
Teach people to be normal.
Teach people to be normal. I like where we're going. Anyone else? £1 million. Come on.
Give them better facilities to, and for where they can stay warm and cozy and comfortable.
Housing, maybe?
Yeah, get people off the street.
Get people off the streets. Where would you put them? In prison?
Put them in places where they can actually be warm and have some respect, because they haven't got that.
Correct. And all for CCTV?
Oh.
Good brother?
Yeah.
How about lighting? More lighting?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. We don't really hang around in town much, especially not at night. But yeah, sometimes there are some dark alleyways which aren't so comfortable or safe.
Close all the
Good
pubs.
ideas. Sorry, one more time?
Close all the pubs.
Close down the pubs. There you go, Val.
Well, they're closed anyway, so and they're not going to be opening anytime soon.
I'm not so sure. I think the 2nd of December might see some change.
Oh, well, no, they're making changes. They want them closed.
Wow. Okay.
After the 2nd of December.
You might find that the £1 million will be spent on holding back demonstrations if all the pubs have to close.
Oh, well.
I think we could find a lot of ways to spend the £1 million.
Yeah.
But what we're going to talk about today is what the trader's suggestion would be. I must say that getting people off the streets and having police on the streets go hand in hand, because a big part of what the police's job is to get, especially criminals or people who aren't behaving correctly, to get them off the streets. But what seems to be the case is that usually getting them off the streets means putting them into prison. And what we're going to learn is that actually, besides for the question of whether it's sustainable, and besides for one of the Rebbe's famous topics about whether it's human, whether it's humane to put a human being into a setting or where they no longer have the ability to choose, to strip the free choice from a person, from a human being, which is what prison kind of does.
And don't you think sometimes we put ourselves in prison?
Yes, very well said. We take our own free choice away, or at least we'll make as if we don't let ourselves choose freely. That's correct. But here, what we're going to learn is not so much about whether prison is right or wrong. We're going to go along the lines between choosing to police versus choosing to uplift, to transform, to educate, like someone said here.
Could I ask something, please?
One more time.
Could I ask something, please?
Please do.
How would you explain recidivism? I can't even say the word.
Recidivism, where somebody is caught for a crime and then does their time, comes back out. What happens next? So recidivism is when they go back to doing their bad ways and come back. So they repeat their offense.
Okay.
So rooting out recidivism means getting past that vicious cycle of where people who were in prison and have done their time are coming back for more time. I think the numbers are like 40% in certain countries. So it's quite scary to think about the idea of how effective our prisoning system, the correctional facilities, at least that's what they call it in America, how much correction they're actually making.
The correction doesn't...
So on, go ahead.
Can I just say that the correction doesn't end when you come out of prison, because the correction and education follows on, and then maybe they will then have a chance to become part of normal society.
Absolutely. I think in that sense, the American system has a lot to learn from the British system. What was it, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we did a course on crime, and we had one of the a Yiddish probation officer come in and do a 5-10 minute explanation of how it works in this country. And amazing, at least the idea is in place. They have a long way to go in getting it to work thoroughly. But the probation system is about literally educating people. And it starts within the prison sentence. And as you say, it doesn't end there. It's where they have a officer who's allocated to them. And the idea is to work them through that journey of becoming better positioned to be able to stay out of crime. But we're going to talk a little bit about it, and we're going to learn that it's not one or the other, but nonetheless, there's the one which is more important than the other. And that's what we're going to learn. And we're going to learn that not only about how we should run the country, because unfortunately, no one's really asking us how to run the country, literally, but we are still responsible for the Olam Katan, our small world, which in Kabbalah is the code name for a human being. A human being is a small world, Olam Katan. And there is the king of that world is us. We are all the king. We are the rulers, the prime ministers. We call the judges who call the shots in our little world. And we all have the little criminal inside of us. You can call him the Vayeitzei. You call him whatever you want. But the ability to be able to control the Vayeitzei is not simple. It's tricky. It's not a black and white answer. And what we're going to learn is, we're going to learn that Yaakov Avinu, in this week's Parshah, teaches us a rule that his own father and grandfather couldn't put into place because the world wasn't ready yet. But Yaakov Avinu was the trailblazer of this new upgrade. But we are the children of all three. And we're going to learn a lesson from Yaakov's edge. So what we're going to look at is how Yaakov dealt with evil, how Yaakov dealt with the other side differently than his father and grandfather. And that's going to highlight what an ideal or what an aspiration would be, not just to be able to deal with the bad side, with the dark side, with evil on level 1, but to take it up a notch, to upgrade it, and to do it Yaakov style as well. So the £1 million that we're talking about isn't just the £1 million of Manchester City Council or the British government's money. It's the £1 million of our money, of our energy. And we're asking, what's the best way to spend our efforts into becoming a better person, into bettering our own personality, our life. And the truth is that there is very good advice. There always is in the Torah. But in this week's Parshah particularly, especially now when we have time to look in the mirror, we have time to be honest with ourselves with hopefully less distractions. And when we do that, we could be even more empowered now than ever. Baruch Hashem, let's get involved. Let's learn the first pasuk in this week's Parsha. And let's keep an eye on the clock because it's not really working with us right now. But we'll work it out. Let's read the first pasuk. It's on the screen for those of us on the screen. If anyone wanted to ask a question before we get started.
Did you say social work could be Gemilut Chasadim?
Also, Gemilut Chasadim for sure. But I think here the idea of social work would mean educating. Social workers in the sense that social workers who engage the criminal or the person who's doing the wrong thing on their level, rather than suppressing them and coming down on top of them. That was the idea of that slide that we had before. But we'll get to it. We'll get to that, hopefully. Let's learn the first pasuk, which reads, Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Haran. Yaakov left Be'er Sheva and he went to Haran. Now here's an interesting fun fact. Rashi makes a calculation. He figures out, based on how old Father Yitzchak was when Yaakov and Esav were born, he figures out how old Yitzchak was, or Yaakov was, when Uncle Yishmael passed away. And then he figures out that Uncle Yishmael passes away when Yaakov leaves Haran, as quoted in the end of last week's Parshah. He basically makes the calculation that there were 14 years between Yaakov leaving home and then traveling to Haran. 14 years. Says Rashi, what was he doing for 14 years? Where did he go? So we know that Yaakov he had a favorite hobby. He already says so when one of the first verses that describe Yaakov, that Yaakov loved to study. That was his hobby. He went to the tents to study. And Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Eholin. For 14 years, he hid in the tent to study, and he was confident that Esav wouldn't be visiting anytime soon. So he wasn't afraid. He sat in the hall to study 14 years. So much so that when he lay down to rest on Mount Moriah, on the Har Moriah, on the Temple Mount, where he had the dream, Rashi says it was the first time he lay down to rest. He put his head down intentionally for 14 years. Because whilst he was studying, he didn't know the disturbances. He learned, and when he fell asleep, picked up his head and continued learning. To lay down, to stretch himself out, the first time in 14 years. Wow. Okay. Interesting fun facts to know about our great-great-grandfather. He's a good guy. But here's the question. Why did Yaakov leave hometown Beersheba to go to Haran? So we just said he was running away from his twin brother who was out to kill him. But if he managed for 14 years, why didn't he just stay there? Why did he leave in the end of the time? Why wasn't he happy to stay in the yeshiva, in the tents of study for an indefinite period of time? Why did he have to go out all the way far away from his family, from studying, to go out to Uncle Lavan, to be harried and tarried? What was all of that about? So one explanation is that he didn't want to let down his mother. He told his mother that he was going to go to Uncle Lavan. So he didn't want to not go to Uncle Lavan. But there's a beautiful medrash that points out a very different reason, which is going to be the opening, will help us learn about what Yaakov, our grandfather, gifted us, brought to the table that his own father and grandfather couldn't do, Avraham and Yitzchak couldn't do. And it's going to be, the key is going to be the name of the place he leaves. What was his hometown that he left? Called? It was called Be'er Sheva. So he left Be'er Sheva, then he goes to Haran. And of course, why do we have to be told where he leaves from? We knew in last week's Sedra that that's where they were living. Is it important for them to tell us where he was leaving from? And of course, the answer is Be'er Sheva isn't just a name. Be'er Sheva means something. What does Be'er Sheva mean? So we're going to go back to the verses that describe the name Be'er Sheva. And the name Be'er Sheva was invented in the times of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu lived in Be'er Sheva as well. Sheva means
7.
7, or also can mean Shavua. Shavua is
Week.
Oath. A week is 7, sorry. Shavua is a week. Shavua with a sh, not a sha, is an oath. Abraham contended with Avimelech about the well of water that the servants of Avimelech had forcibly seized. So Abraham had dug wells. Avimelech, who was the king of Gerar, picked a fight. He goes, hold on 1 second, I dare you have water and we don't have water. You, Abraham, how do you come here and you starting to become wealthy and all? No way. The well is ours. So Avimelech now later comes to do a peace talk with Abraham, and Abraham says, oh, what happened to that well of water your lot stole off me? So Avimelech says to him, oh, no clue. Oh no, I never heard of this. I do not know who did this thing. Neither did you tell me, nor did I hear of it until today. So Abraham, nice guy, easygoing, took flock and cattle, gave them to Avimelech, and they both formed a covenant. Therefore, and they say, you know what, let's look forward. Let's pass this behind us. Let's do a deal. Therefore, he named the place Be'er Sheva, the place of where they swore they took an oath. Be'er means the well. Sheva means an oath. And he called it the Be'er Sheva, the well of the oath, where they took an oath to make a peace treaty. They formed a covenant in Be'er Sheva, and Avimelech and Fichal. Fichal was the chief of staff, the head of the army. His general arose, and they returned to the land of Philistines. Avimelech and Abraham make a deal over Be'er Sheva, and that's how the name Be'er Sheva came. Guess what happens the next generation? 1 generation later. Same story. Yitzchak happens to be living in Gerar, nearby Avimelech. Guess what happens next? They pick a fight, and they take away the wells, and he ends up living in a different well, and another well, and another well, until the end, he ends up calling, he goes up to Be'er Sheva. Avimelech went in from Gerar and a group of his companions and Fichal and his general, and they said, we have seen that God was with you, so we said, let there now be an oath between us, between ourselves and you, and let us form a covenant with you, just like it was between us and your father. And he named it Shiva. Therefore, the city is known as Be'er Sheva until this day. It's 7. So Be'er Sheva both means oath, it means 7, because of the story of the peace deal that Abraham and Yitzchak made in that place. Says the Medrash, Yaakov Avinu didn't just run away from his brother Esau, he ran away from Be'er Sheva. What does that mean? Says the Medrash, he ran away from making a peace deal. Rabbi Yudan said, this verse is to be read, and Jacob fled from the well of oaths. Namely, Jacob said to himself, I don't want Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, to approach me and say, swear to me as your father and grandfather did. I don't want to be in a position where I'm going to have to make a peace deal with the bad guys. And we're going to learn he wasn't against peace. He wasn't against making a deal. As we see at the end of the Parshah, he made a deal, even with Uncle Lavan. But the deal had to be made on his terms, very different terms. And these terms, Avimelech's terms, were unacceptable to Yaakov's newfound approach to crime, to evil, to darkness. Yaakov's new approach was upgraded from Avraham and Yitzhak. And whilst Avraham and Yitzhak had no better option, and they did make a peace deal on Avimelech's terms, Yaakov said, no, I'd rather leave home. I'd rather run away and leave everything behind rather than have to make a peace deal on Avimelech's terms with the bad guys. And that's what Yaakov was really trying to avoid when he fled Beersheba. So now we're going to try and establish what were those terms that Yitzchak and Avraham did agree to, that Yaakov would not agree to. And that's a life message for us of what level 2 or the ideal state of dealing with our own hardships, our own challenges, urges, Yetzer Haras. And as we said many times, what is today's real Yetzer Hara? What's the Yetzer Hara of the 21st century? Worry, anxiety, feeling sad, feeling depressed. These are real Yetzer Haras. These are Yetzer Haras that are so real, so debilitating. They paralyze us. And the Yetzer Hara loves it when we're sad. Oh, I'm happy when you're sad. Rahman al-Zan, and we fall for it over and over again, and we justify it. And I say, yes, I'm sad because it's a good reason. It is a good reason. But we need to deal with it because it's a real Yetzer Hara. It's the evil inclination. And here we're going to learn from Yaakov what's a good way to deal with sadness, with worry, with anxiety. What's going to be? What if? How come? What's going to happen? All these kind of worries are very real, and they happen to us in real life. And the Torah tells us, yes, we can. We can deal with it. We can take it out. Not only take it out once, but we can outgrow it. How are we going to do it? So let's look to Yaakov. In order to explain it, we're going to do a little bit not inside. And we're going to go to Hasidus in general has 2 approaches to dealing with sadness. And we're going to use sadness as an example. Ooh, am I in trouble? We're dealing with sadness. There are 2 approaches. One approach is you know what, let's do it inside. One approach is the davening approach. And in particular, Parshah of, which is the highest point of davening, the most meditative part of davening is Shema. The Amida is when we stand quietly with bittul, subservience. But the meditative part of davening is the part which is Shema. So here we go. Says the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Moharan and Tanya. Reciting Shema or other parts of prayer is a spiritually opportune time for all. It is then that one can fixate their mind on the greatness of Hashem and rouse their heart with fiery flames of love, motivating themselves to cleave to Hashem by fulfilling his mitzvahs and studying the Torah out of love. The second verse in Shema, V'ahavta, and you shall love Hashem. That's quite a direct way of saying you're going to be on fire. You do this right, you'll be switched on. That's what Shema should look like, regardless of what a minute before and a minute after Shema might look like. Shema is an oasis. And the Alter Rebbe says it could fill you. When you reach Shema, if you do it with a little bit of time and get involved, it's like an oasis. I'm going to put this into a non-davening or a non-religious example. Person's really sad, like in a bad mood. Maybe something really bad happened. Maybe one of my children, chas v'shalom, someone's children is really worrying them, or there's something else that's really worrying them, and I can't shake it off. All of a sudden, get a reminder on my calendar that there's a wedding I need to go to, and I'm supposed to be there. They're going to be waiting for me. So I push it off 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then I know I can't miss it because it's going to be even worse. So I get myself dressed up, go out to the wedding, and as I walk into the hall, there's like live music. People are smiling, dancing, and after like 10 seconds, you walked into the room, you can't help it. You just get swept in with the excitement. And the excitement of the wedding around you just envelops the person in such a way that the whole worry and the whole sadness It's just crushed, gone, just elevated. And that person's entire sadness has been drowned and totally suppressed in the excitement of the moment. Why? Because it's very hard to stay sad in a wedding hall. It's very hard to stay sad when everyone around you is just full of life, full of joy. So what do you do if you don't have a wedding to go to? So do something that's going to make you excited. Find something that's going to make you jolly. Maybe a bar of chocolate, joking. Maybe something else. Maybe something exciting. Whatever it's going to do. If you like reading a book, go for a walk. And all of a sudden, you don't have space to be sad. That's one approach. That's the approach of suppressing, drowning, crushing the sadness. And the same is true with every type of evil. The Gemara says, if a person finds himself drawn to something immoral, they should rush to a place that's going to distract them, like going to a shir, or going to a place where your mind's going to be hijacked for something good. The problem is that if you're saying Shema, gone to a wedding, having the distraction of whatever type it is, that can only last as long as the distraction's in place. And the Alter Rebbe in that same chapter of Tanya goes on to say, what happens when you finish Shema? When you finish Shema, it's not quite the same. Says the Alter Rebbe, after prayer, the evil impulses can easily come back, mixing with goodness to challenge a person as they walk through the darkness of this world. Because although we won over the darkness, although we won over the sadness, the worry, the anxiety through distraction, but the distraction held down the Jack in the box. Now the hand moves away. Out comes Jack. And that's not good. Says the Alter Rebbe, it's not terrible because at least there's a residual remaining traces of the goodness. You're still better off. It's still good to do that, first of all, for the time being, but also it lasts somewhat, but it's not a long-term plan. It's not a long-term plan. Says Chassidus, this sort Avraham and Yitzchak. Avraham and Yitzchak were out to change the world. Avraham was the trailblazer monotheism. He didn't go anywhere without making a debate and a drasha and winning over the minds of people. However, evil was suppressed. Evil was crushed. Sadness didn't have any ability to exist whilst Avraham was playing music, whilst Avraham was out there making noise. And it was great. It was fantastical. But the evil did not change. So when he was faced with someone like Avimelech, who wasn't going to change, his only option was, peace deal. You stay there, I stay here. You don't come near me, I don't come near you. Just keep the distance because you're written off. Says Yaakov Avinu, that's great for step one. Sometimes when it's urgent, when something has to be done right now, you got to do it. You got to use the plaster, the Band-Aid approach. You got to make sure that right now you stop midstream, that there shouldn't be any bad. If someone finds themselves in a sad, worrying, anxious situation, which as we said is the real Vayeitzei of 21st century, when a person doesn't feel that they have motivation, don't have any passion left, that's Vayeitzei urgent. Right away. Do something that's going to boost you. But it's not a long-term plan. The long-term plan says, Yaakov, can't make no peace deals. I'm sorry, Avimelech. I'm going to rather skip town than lock myself into your sorts of peace deals where you stay away, I stay away, and it stays like that. No. I'm going to head out into Charon Avshalom. I'm going to go to Uncle Lavan's place. Boy, is he a swindler. And the place where he lives, it's an immoral town. As Rashi says, Charon, the name Charon comes from the word Charon, which means anger. It's the wrath of God. It's a place that makes Hashem so sad, so angry. It's not a great place. But out of there, I'm going to find a wife. I'm going to take Uncle Lava's daughters and turn them into holiness. I'm going to extract goodness from Uncle Lava. And then I'll build the entire Jewish nation in Charon. That's what we're going to build foundations. Because we're going to transform. And that's a different level. What does it mean to transform sadness? What does it mean to transform anxiety? What does it mean to transform any sort of darkness? And here, Yaakov, our great-grandfather, tells us that there's an entire deeper, greater level that we humans are capable of. And this is what we should aspire to do. Not just to stay away and keep distance from anything that's evil, which of course we should do, but we should seek to transform, to rechannel anything that's leading us to darkness. How did Yaakov do that? Yaakov went into the lion's den and started working with what he had. And when he finished with Lavan and he'd taken what he could, he then moved on back to Israel, go to Esau and meet up with Esau. And then he worked in his land, the land of Israel, doing the same thing. And the end of his life, his continuation, Yosef went down to Mitzrayim to do the same thing. Yaakov was sending a new trend, trailblazing a new approach. Let's talk practically. Beautiful letter of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe quotes from Torah. In Torah, the Alter Rebbe, see if I can find the text. We're against the clock of shtickle. Here's the quote from Torah. Torah that the Alter Rebbe writes, and the Rebbe uses it in a letter. Let's do the letter first. I like it that way around, if you don't mind. You write that you are besieged with melancholy thoughts. So someone's basically depressed. They have a hard time being happy. Though I find this somewhat surprising, if it is happening, well, you know what is stated in Torah. Melancholy can also drive rigorous study, especially Torah study. Says the Rebbe to this person who is suffering from the Vayeitzei of sadness. And the Vayeitzei of sadness is very real, as we said, in 21st century. What can I do about it? So one answer could be, go and have a good time, go to places, expose yourself to happiness. But that's only a short-term answer. So long as you've got enough weddings to go to, and you're okay eating enough chocolate, whatever else you're going to do, and there's enough music that you enjoy, then okay, maybe. But it hasn't really answered the problem. We spent £1 million on police and CCTV. What happens when we blow the £1 million? What happens when the prisons are too full to be able to hold any more people? What's going to be then? How are we going to make town a great place to be? And you know what the answer is? Transform. This, Yaakov says, rechannel. If someone has an anger problem, we know that a lot of people who are very creative happen to be snappy. And they can get angry. Says the Rebbe, well, it works the other way around as well. A lot of people who are snappy and angry type are creative. If it works one way around, it tends to work the other way around as well. Think about it. If I find myself becoming snappy, angry, worked up very quickly, I need to reframe that. I need to be giving an outlet to this tendency that I have to be able to make it channeled into an appropriate and good way. The text on the screen says the same thing. If we read the Torah that the Rebbe is quoting in this letter, we would see something that didn't necessarily say what the Rebbe says here. In Torah it says that people who naturally are drawn to learning tend to be the people who are introverts, who aren't so outgoing, who aren't so lively and bubbly. Says the Rebbe, read that Torah and think. If someone finds themselves closed, I don't feel like in the mood of meeting people, I don't want to see anybody, I just want to be in my own bed and mope. Not because I like doing bad things, because I just don't have any drive, any passion to do anything. Says the Rebbe, look at that same Torah. It's telling us that closedness, introvertness, or more importantly, the mara shchira, the sad drive within a person, is closely related to studying. You close yourself into your book, and you live in your own world, and you study that way. Here's the trick. The person writes to the Rebbe, I'm suffering from sadness. So the Rebbe could tell him, well, go to a wedding and go and have an excitement. But that's not a long-term plan. The long-term plan, the Yaakov plan, transform. Find an outlet for that sadness. In his particular case, which is quite often the case, if I find myself in a mood, I need to express that in a productive way. I'm going to make it my mission, whenever I feel that way, to open up a book. Not just a novel or sci-fi or whatever it is, or some whatever novel. I'm going to find myself a productive book to read. And even better, it should be a book of Torah. Because then you'll be studying something that's lifting you up. But what have I done? I've used the drive within me, not to run away from it, to suppress it, to ignore it, to overcome it. Like Avraham and Yitzchak would have done. Yaakov approach. Try to transform, turn things around, find the good expression in everything, because nothing that we have is pure bad. Every talent, drive that we have in this life is given to us by Hashem, and is therefore a key to being able to be productive and finding that expression. The same is true with anxiety. I'm deep into details. I'm calculating. Find a good project to use that calculation and being able to analyze things, to be productive. And when we do that, Yetzer hara of sadness, take a break. We're coming to get you, not to crush you, but to use you, not to get rid of you, but to channel you and to harness you. Because you, Yetzer hara of worry, of sadness, of 21st century, you're mincemeat. Why? Because we are the people who are closer to redemption than ever. We are Mashiach generation. We're not going to let this happen. We're not going to let sadness overcome us. We're going to take every part of our fiber and we're going to put it into practice, into work. And that way, not only will we win over Avimelech, but that way Avimelech will become our supporter. He'll be a driving force. Maybe we should bench every one of us, but we should have the courage to keep on focusing, keep on journeying towards the redemption, Geula Pratis, personal Geula, personal redemption, and Geula Kolis, which will lead us to the general redemption. And of course, we should have, as it's saying here, this business connection. Along the way, we should have lots of beautiful, good news to share in good health, in happiness, and all the good things. We're closer than ever. We're making it happen. Thank you for joining everybody once again. Thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Cohen, Michal and Leah Cohen for sponsoring the material. We wish everyone a wonderful week. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
What does Torah
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Wonderful. I'm happy now. Thanks.
What does Torah or mean?
Torah Or is the name of a sefer written by the Alter Rebbe, which means the Torah of light. Or is light. Torah Or, Torah of light, or the light of
Written by who?
Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Tanya.
Okay.
Fantastical. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Sylvia.